Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Inside Man Utd. And my name is Rowan Brennan. Thank you very much for joining me again. And of course, if it's your first time joining us, thanks for checking us out. And if you like the content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Today's episode, we are looking ahead to the Brighton game week 5. United kicking off at 3 o'clock at Old Trafford. And injury news on both sides. How are the teams going to line up? There's been a bit of action over the international break. Some players playing well, other players not being available. Injuries maybe not being overcome. So choices to be made in squad selection for both De Zerbi and Erik Ten Hag for the kickoff at 3 o'clock. Let's get into it. A big match ahead for Erik Ten Hag and Roberto De Zerbi. Both teams displaying some wild form since the beginning of the season, with Brighton turning in some great performances, beating a very strong Newcastle 4-1, but also succumbing to their own big losses as well. 4-0, I believe, was one of the results earlier in the season. United themselves with very concerning form across all 4 games, despite eking out 2 wins and then losing to the 2 top opposition teams that we faced in those opening 4 games in Arsenal and Spurs. United's form is not good coming into this game, with Brighton coming off the back of a very encouraging and very dominant victory against Newcastle, with Evan Ferguson, of course, bagging a hat-trick. I'm going to get into Brighton's lineup a little bit after I get into what I believe the United lineup can and should be. Starting at the back, Andre Onana. I think that one's a pretty obvious choice. He was on his international duty this week and confirmed the qualification for Cameroon into the AFCON. So it's guaranteed that we're going to be missing him for 4 games in January, whereby Inder will certainly be coming in to deputise in his absence. But Andre Onana, in between the sticks, pretty obvious choice, of course. At right back, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, a man reborn, having done very well since the start of the season. Even during some of our darkest and poorest performances, Aaron Wan-Bissaka was still one of the shining lights, which is very, very encouraging to see. And I'm really delighted for him. I think most Man United fans are. And he's been rewarded, or there's talk of a new contract being put on the table for Aaron Wan-Bissaka. So very well done to him indeed. And it looks like Diogo Dalot will probably come in on that left-hand side. He did very, very well against Arsenal, and I am expecting a similar performance from him on that side. Regulon, or Regulon, as I believe he's actually called, could get some minutes later on in the game, depending on Dalot's form. But given the fact that Brighton do play a very kind of similar-ish type of pressing style to Arsenal, and a big focus on their wide men, I think Diogo Dalot is going to be relied upon to put in a very similar performance that he put in with Saka, and keeping a tight grip on that side of the pitch. So Diogo Dalot to start on the left-hand side and Aaron Wan-Bissaka on the right. Middle of the pitch, a little bit more difficult to predict, probably easier than I'd like it to be. I would imagine that Lindelof is going to come back in. He's one of the only fit centre-halves that we have currently, and I would imagine that he will be partnered with Harry Maguire. I don't think Johnny Evans is going to get the nod ahead of Harry Maguire. Harry Maguire, of course, putting in some typically media-heavy performances in both his games against Ukraine and Scotland, with him not having the best of games against Ukraine, marking his own man. I thought that footage was a little harsh, that he was marking his own man in that still image. An image can really betray what actually happened. But of course, then he got his own goal against Scotland in their 3-1 victory. It does look like Harry Maguire and Lindelof are going to be in the centre of the pitch. This is going to drastically change how United approach this game. They're not going to be able to play out from the back as confidently or at all with the ball carrying and dribbling ability of Victor Lindelof and Harry Maguire. I think we're going to be playing long balls, or certainly going out wide and trying to build up from those areas. But I don't see the same type of tactics being employed in the absence of Rafael Varane and Lisandro Martinez. So a back line of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Diogo Dalot, and in the centre, it's going to be Lindelof and Maguire. Centre of the pitch for United, this is going to be a topic of debate for many United fans. I really do think Ten Hag is going to put in the typical trio of Casemiro, Eriksen, and Fernandes. However, I hope he doesn't, because I think we need a little bit more defensive steel with Scott McTominay, particularly with Maguire and Lindelof at the back. There's going to be a lot of space between the midfield and those two. I don't think they can be relied upon to bring up the line too much because they don't have a lot of pace and they're not good running back to goal. They like to be facing towards the opposition. Therefore, I think a more defensive-minded midfield with a more protective screen to stop opposition players just overwhelming those two. I think we need a little bit more defensive solidity at the back. I'm hoping that it's Scott McTominay and Casemiro with Bruno Fernandes at the top of that midfield three. However, I do think Ten Hag is going to go for Eriksen instead of McTominay, just for a little bit more creativity, possibly because we don't have that creative nous with Martinez and Varane at the back. He's going to go for Eriksen, who can play deep, does play deep with Casemiro and did very well there during long stretches of last season. However, I think with the way Brighton play, their physicality, their fitness, their speed, it could be a little bit too much for Eriksen, which we did see against Arsenal. A perfect encompassing of what Eriksen does. He scores a goal and within 60 seconds he was, I won't say at fault for the goal, but he just completely lacking in any sort of defensive nous, just allowed a player to come onto the penalty spot and score a goal completely unmarked. I'm hoping McTominay comes in. That is going to be my choice. However, I would not be surprised to see Erik Ten Hag go for Eriksen. The front three, I think it's going to be great to see Rasmus Højlund on his first ever start. That's going to be great to see him lead the line and see what he can do for a full 90 minutes. Marcus Rashford, of course, going to be starting on the left, having gotten a good few minutes with Gareth Southgate's last lineup, starting on that left-hand side, which was great to see. On the right, that's where things get a little bit more dicey. I just need to say this, but just because Sancho unpinned his tweet of social media does not mean all things are rosy again between Ten Hag and Sancho. Those talks did not go well, apparently, with Ten Hag being very surprised with how Jadon Sancho initially handled his criticism, which I thought was also wrong. However, he's the manager. He did it. Last roll of the dice, I imagine. It worked for the guys at Dortmund. He probably thought, why not? It worked there. It might work here too. It didn't. And Sancho came out swinging. He left that pinned up. I don't think unpinning a tweet where you absolutely rip your manager apart and call him a liar, essentially, is going to do him any favors getting back into the team. Facundo Pellistri playing very, very well for Uruguay. Marco Bielsa singing his praises. Even ex-pros like Luis Suarez saying how excited they were for Pellistri to now be a regular starter for that Uruguayan team. He seems to be doing very, very well. And I believe Ten Hag will want to show that you work hard, play hard, you get the rewards. So it's my presumption that Facundo Pellistri, and I think a lot of United fans are willing Pellistri to get that start. Sancho definitely will not be starting this game. I would be amazed if he gets to start this game. He'll certainly be on the bench in case something happens. We need a goal, a bit of inspiration. I think he'll be brought on, but there is absolutely no chance that Jadon Sancho is starting this game. I will be absolutely astounded if he does. So Facundo Pellistri on the right for me. Garnacho might get the nod. He has been playing well. He got more minutes with Argentina over the international break. People very excited for his inclusion. He is a left-footed player. If they do want to play that more inverted style, Facundo Pellistri being a right-footed player, so is Garnacho. So they're both going to be a right-footed player on the right-handed side. They won't be kind of inverting and cutting in, at least to the same way that Anthony Wood or Marcus does on the left. So Garnacho is a right-footed player, so he could play there as well. But I would like to see Pellistri given the nod, given how patient he's been. And Garnacho's already got his opportunities on the left. But he could be a man in form, and it is hard to ignore that little Alejandro Garnacho. I think everyone loves that kid, but I think everyone is looking for Pellistri to get that start. So it's that front three for me. Rasmus Højlund up top, Marcus on the left, and Facundo Pellistri on the right. Of course, with some options in Jadon Sancho and Garnacho to come on, either for Marcus Rashford or Pellistri. As for Brighton's lineup, a few injury worries for them as well. Predominantly with up top, Evan Ferguson was missing from Ireland's qualification games. A very, very big miss for the Irish squad. He did want to play, but he was actually told by the Irish doctors, listen, you're not ready to play, and he did want to play. So De Zerbi probably very thankful that Ireland were being very selfless in their games, particularly against the Netherlands, where his presence would have been really, really beneficial. But Ireland even deemed it unwise for him to play, and I think he's not going to be fit for this United game, certainly not to start. Danny Welbeck still trying to return to fitness as well, so I think it's quite clear that new signing João Pedro is going to lead the line up front. He did play a little bit deeper behind Ferguson in the win against Newcastle, but I think João Pedro is going to get a starting berth up top in the absence of Evan Ferguson and Danny Welbeck. Out wide, Solly March, Kaoru Mitoma, two very informed players who are carrying on that incredible form they had last year. In the absence of Danny Welbeck and Evan Ferguson, I think Enciso will probably now be coming off the bench. Already has 2 assists to his name, so I think he will be playing in that forward 3 behind the main striker of João Pedro, with Mitoma and March either side of him. In the midfield positions behind, I think it's safe to say Pascal Gross will continue to show fine form in that position, hopefully not too fine against United. And beside him, it would look like Billy Gilmour might get a start again, having played so well against Newcastle, although manutd is also a consideration there. I see no reason why Billy Gilmour would not be giving a starting berth in that 2 kind of double pivot position just behind those 3 strikers. For Brighton's backline, I think it's going to be the ever-reliable Estupiñán playing in on that left fullback position with Joel Veltman on the right-hand side. Those two obviously combining and playing very, very well with those forward players from last season into this season. Van Heck and Lewis Dunk, as ever, as the centre-half pairing. And at the goalkeeping position, looks like Jason Steele, having wrestled that position away from Sanchez, who's now at Chelsea, and looking like he solidified his status as number 1, has lost it in the last 2 games to Bart Verbruggen, the Dutch international. He is playing at the under-21 level. He was bought for 16 million, I believe, from Anderlecht, and has been playing quite well, and now seems to be the favoured choice of Roberto De Zerbi for the goalkeeping spot at Brighton. So that is going to be the back line for Brighton, and it's going to be an interesting game given United's lack of a strong offensive presence with Luke Shaw on the left. I think Dalot is going to do what he did against Arsenal and play very defensive and kind of take care of that quadrant of the pitch, I suppose. And with Maguire and Lindelof playing, I imagine, deep, they're not going to be playing that high a line with Maguire and Lindelof both weak when running back towards goal. I think it's a risk to have a high line there, particularly with over-the-top balls and those guys being very, very slow to get back and recover. I think it's going to be a very different looking defensive line position, especially for Andre Onana as well. So I think balls over the centre backs, or maybe it being collected by either Casemiro and McTominay deeper in the pitch and then carrying that ball through. We're not going to be bypassing Brighton's high press. That's how they like to play. They like to press high, and we will not have the typical manpower to overcome that we would have had with Martinez and Varane. So it's going to be a very different type of game. Perhaps that's the reason why Eriksen will come in, so he can pick the ball up from those deeper positions and carry the ball forward in a more confident fashion than maybe McTominay is believed to be able to do. But we've seen that McTominay, he can carry the ball. He does have offensive attributes. He started as a striker, like so many good players, and they just can't make the grade as a striker or a creative midfielder. But they do have great defensive instincts, and of course have very good ball control skills because of their forward play previously, and they just find themselves coming further and further back. Happened with Ferdinand. He started as a striker, then went into midfield, and eventually became one of the best centre halves in the world. So I believe that United are going to be picking the ball up a little bit deeper and bringing that forward through Casemiro and McTominay, with Dalot maybe coming into that midfield as well to try and bring that extra presence when necessary, and trying to transition maybe into a 3-3 with the defensive line, and maybe bringing in that box midfield with Fernandes and being the 3-4 kind of formation that a lot of these kind of high pressing possession based teams like to play. Estupiñán and Veltman will bomb forward. They will create spaces at the back. So it's my assumption that United are going to try and play a little bit deeper to protect the two centre halves from any over the top balls, and to make sure that we don't get overloaded in those midfield areas, and rely on the speed of Rasmus Højlund, Marcus Rashford and Pellistri out on the right. provided he does start. Højlund does like to play very deep, so I think he's going to be coming into that midfield as well, helping to pick up the ball. He does like to play on that left-hand side and then drift into the middle, as he so often did with Atalanta. So I can see him picking up the defensive duties of that left-hand side that would typically be Shaw's, and maybe picking up the ball from Dalot on the halfway line and then allowing Marcus to cut inside, picking the ball up, laying it off to Marcus, who can then go on his runs while he then makes a late run into the box, which he did so often for Atalanta. So that's how I see this game going. United needing to exploit the space that are being left by Estupiñán and Veltman when they pour forward. They obviously don't have their ideal midfield and starting lineup if everyone was fit as well. So both sides having to make concessions with their personnel and possibly with the style of play. But it does look like De Zerbi's pretty married to the way he likes to play. And he does have most of his players available. And Solly March and Mitoma are going to provide a huge, fast threat to exploit any sort of a high line. That's what they want to do. Veltman and Estupiñán obviously pouring forward to stretch out that defense to try and allow space for those wide players to cut in and exploit. So I believe that Dalot is going to be hanging back to stop that from happening like he did with Saka. And the partnership of Lindelof and Maguire staying quite deep with McTominay and Casemiro coming back, Højlund coming back. So I think United are going to play quite deep, try and pick up the ball and bomb forward whenever they get possession and use the speed of Højlund, Rashford and Pellistri to break through that high defensive line and the space that De Zerbi's team typically leave when they're trying to create those attacks and bring up that high line. What do I think the score is going to be? It's very, very difficult to predict. I think this is going to be 2-2. It's going to be a very high-scoring game. All of De Zerbi's games are high-scoring. I don't think there's been anything less than 3 goals in all of his games. It's been 3-1, 4-1 against all his teams. When they lose, it's high-scoring. When they win, it's high-scoring. And it seems that United are following a similar trend at the moment. So I don't think there's going to be a lack of goals in this game. I think it's going to be 2-2, and I'm being optimistic there. I think that we can handle this game. Both sides have a few absences that they're going to have to deal with. I'm trying to be optimistic here. I don't think we're going to beat Brighton. They are a team in form. We are not. But I am hoping with new personnel like Højlund coming in and Pellistri getting his chance to shine, that they're really going to grab that chance with both hands and use their speed to absolutely punish that high line that's coming in from Brighton. So my prediction is 2-2, and I will gladly take a point against Brighton, if I'm being perfectly honest. Seeing how poorly we did against Spurs and Arsenal, I think a point against a very, very strong Brighton side, given how we're currently playing, I would take that no problem. So what do you guys think? What are your comments? Do you think that is going to be the team? Do you think someone else should be playing on the right-hand side? What do you think that scoreline is going to be? Any comments, please leave them underneath. As always, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.